As content creators, sometimes we have to deal with situations in our work that are less than satisfactory, that kind of suck. Sometimes they're just flat out aggravating. But we're all going to deal with it at one point or another, so I think it's really important to talk about how to cope and deal with bad clients or difficult gigs. So let's get roaring. What's up, y'all? Ryan here. Today is going to be all about catharsis and helpful tips about how to keep you and your sanity healthy while dealing with the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to client relations. By the way, do you like the new setup? We've been doing some decorating in here and I think it looks dope. It's just gray wallpaper. We wanted our security deposit back. So I've been really busy for like 2.5 months now, I think, non-stop work. I had 3 different projects land on my plate at the exact same time. I'm still working on one of them. Never want to do that again, by the way. One of them went really well. It was super organized, and they actually paid me more than I originally quoted. That's the first time that's ever happened in my career. So we'll just call that a stellar gig, and I hope to work with them more in the future because they're awesome. The other 2 had issues, and that's really what I want to talk about today. Because as great as that stellar project was, those kind of gigs are sadly pretty rare in my line of work. Usually there's gonna be issues and things that come up while you're doing your projects. Your job as a content creator is to determine whether or not those issues and problems that come up are worth dueling with your client over. In other words, if the issue is something that's going to end up being detrimental to the project or somehow compromises the original plan, then maybe it's something you need to bring up with the client. This isn't like working in retail. When you do creative work, the customer's not always right, and it's up to you to decide when to bring things up or to make better creative suggestions for things in the project. The client is relying on your expertise to make the best choices for the project. But at the end of the day, they are the ones paying for it, so they really have the ultimate say on things. However, if you as the expert still feel like something is not working or something's kind of off, be confident, bring it up with them, and then kindly debate why you think it's not working and offer a solution to the issue. Usually they will listen, but sometimes you're still gonna have to deal with stubborn clients who still think that they are correct and know better than you, the expert. These situations can be extremely frustrating. This is where having a sense of humor and a kind heart can really help. Or have somebody that you can vent to, because the last thing you want to do is blow up at your client and burn a bridge. Usually the best course of action with these situations is to just do what the client asks, as long as it's not going to waste a ton of time and be super detrimental to the project. You got to do this even if you know it won't work, because the thing is, you know it won't work because you have years and years of experience and you have an intimate knowledge of this stuff, and the client doesn't. Sometimes the client just has to see it to understand, and that's just how it goes. 9 times out of 10, they'll finally realize what you're saying and probably go with your way anyways. Either that or you'll come to some kind of a compromise where both parties are happy. Sometimes the issue is so minor that it's not even worth fighting over, and I just change the thing that they want changed and move on, even if it's dumb. Or maybe you'll find that the client was actually right the whole time. I mean, none of us are perfect. We can't see everything. And in that case, having humility is key. I think it's important to distinguish the difference between just arguing and having a healthy brainstorm too, because there is a difference. Because sometimes tension with your clients or your teammates is actually a really good thing. It can lead to a better quality product or better ideas. When you have a healthy brainstorm, it means that you're bouncing ideas off of your inner circle of people to make sure that the ideas that you're forming in your head are actually legitimate and good. Or if they're bad ideas, maybe you can try something else or get constructive feedback. It's okay to have bad ideas. No creator gets it right every time, and that's why it's important to have a system of checks and balances, or checkpoints with your client, to make sure that you're on the right track. Imagine how terrible it would be to go through the whole process of finishing an entire video project from front to back, just to find out that you had completely missed the mark and your client doesn't like it at all. Now, you're gonna be stressed out having to either redo stuff or fix the whole thing, and your client's probably gonna be mad at you too. You'll be mad at yourself for not checking in, or maybe even mad at your client for not understanding your vision of the project, which, by the way, is not your project, it's their project that they're paying you to do. Keep that in mind. It's just not going to be good all around. Make sure you have checkpoints. It's important. For me, I've been dealing with 2 different clients that have been pretty difficult. The first one is difficult just simply because they have a lack of knowledge about how the video content production world works. They're one of those companies with a large team of kind of tech illiterate people who feel like they have to weigh in on the project even when it's not really helpful. They don't really know a lot about video marketing or the world that I'm coming from, and they think that it's easy to fix little things here and there. In reality, it's really not that easy because sometimes changing things here and there ends up, throwing off the timing of the whole video. So now I got to go back and retime the whole edit. And then, I have to re-render the whole video again, which takes a while, especially if it's animation. And, something that they think maybe will take a couple minutes to fix, in reality is actually taking hours out of my day that I could be spending doing something else or working on another client's project. And a lot of things probably should have been fixed in the storyboard or the script before I even started editing. So those kinds of things can be really frustrating. Luckily, this client is very kind and they also pay really well. So I'm more willing to work with them and go above and beyond to accommodate their needs, which is another important topic I want to bring up here. If you're only getting paid like a small amount to do a job, sometimes it's not worth the headache.
I don't work cheap.
This is the case with my second client. This is a unique case too because this is a pretty cool project for a big name client that would look really good on my resume. I like to call this sexy work. However, the budget for this project was pretty poor, and we knew that going into it. Me and the team had to take a pretty significant pay cut in order to try to secure this gig, which, side note, I think is a lame tactic to try to get a bunch of smaller studios to come in at the lowest rate. But regardless, the pay wasn't going to be great, and we all knew that. I was also under the impression that this gig would be pretty cut and dry. Basically, I thought everything would be ready to go once I received the footage, and I would be able to just edit these and knock them out really quickly. That didn't end up being the case. Well, there actually ended up being a few different issues surrounding the actual shoot of the project. I was missing stuff I needed for the edit. They were making changes to the script and kind of the edits that they wanted after they had already shot all the footage, so that creates issues. And because of the nature of this project, I had to create tons of revisions and alternate takes of 8 different video spots that we were putting together that were going to be shown across 3 different platforms. So we're talking 40 different pieces of content I was delivering each time we had a new update or a revision. Insanely frustrating. Anyways, it came to a point where I felt like the initial quote that I had presented for the project was just not going to be worth it to me anymore with the amount of extra work that I was having to do to keep the project afloat. So I simply worked up the courage and I stated my case to the producer. I explained to them how I was feeling and I showed how much extra work I was putting in for this, and they agreed to up my price. It really ended up not being that big of a deal. Sometimes though, you'll ask for more money on things like this and your client will not agree or they'll reject that. And that's okay. They aren't necessarily obligated to do anything for you if you already agreed to a certain amount at the beginning of the project. So at that point, I think it's important to weigh your options. Obviously, don't just drop the project and be a jerk about it to them, because if you've already put in a lot of work, it's not going to be worth your time. You could negotiate to just get paid what you're already owed and then give all the project and the footage back to them so that they can go find another editor or somebody else to work on it. As long as you're not breaking any contracts or anything, I think that's okay to do. You may burn a bridge with that client, but it is what it is. And if they're not paying good enough, it's probably not worth your time anyways. You could probably find better work somewhere else. I feel like this situation though is going to be pretty rare. Usually if the client is already working with you, it's going to be more of a headache for them to try to find somebody else. So probably they're just going to pay you more and get on with the project so they can get it done quicker. You never know though. It's okay to fire a client if you don't enjoy working with them and they're not paying you very well. I always try to side on under-promising and over-delivering on my projects, and I try to be realistic with my clients about what their expectations should be up front. And this helps so that I don't overwhelm myself, but it also kind of works out because it creates less room for bad tension to happen. The more creative work you do, the more of a keen sense you will develop for working with people, and probably avoid a lot of weird situations. There's a lot I didn't know before starting this business last year, so I've been trying to ask many questions to other people who have experience doing this so I can get better. There's a pretty famous story from Hollywood in the 80s about this studio executive from Universal who thought that Back to the Future was a bad title for that movie, and instead suggested that director Bob Zemeckis changed the movie title to Spaceman from Pluto.
Nightmare.
Luckily, Steven Spielberg was one of the executive producers on this project, and he had already spent a decade and a half dealing with these kinds of studio execs, clients if you will, and he knew exactly how to handle this situation. He responded with this letter. Hey, so-and-so, thanks for your most humorous memo. We all got a good laugh out of it. Keep 'em coming, Steven. And that studio exec felt so embarrassed that they never heard about it again, and they were able to keep the title Back to the Future. Can you imagine if they had just gone along with the client's requests? Do you think Back to the Future would have had as much of an impact as it did with a lame, hokey title like that? Probably not.
Whoa, this is heavy.
But it all comes down to how you handle clients. If Spielberg would have just said no without much tact, then it probably would have caused a fight between the studio executives and the creative team on that project, because studio heads love control. And maybe they would have gone as far as shutting down the whole project, like who knows? It's happened before. And I'm not saying the way that Spielberg handled that was necessarily the best way, but certainly it worked in everyone's favor in the long run. And that small bit of personal embarrassment that studio exec had to endure was probably a lot better than all the embarrassment the whole team would have had if the movie had flopped at the box office because of a dumb title and nobody wanted to go see it. So the moral of the story is humility and tact. Never respond to a frustrating client right away. Always give yourself some time to cool off and think rationally before you respond. It'll really help. All right, that's all I got. You guys have a blessed day. Peace.